Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at the newest, most recent Abrahamic monotheistic faiths, that is Islam. A follower of Islam is known as a Muslim, so that the two terms are often kind of used together interchangeably. So remember that if you're talking about a Muslim, it is simply a follower of Islam. Now, when you're talking about the different sects within Islam, there are two primary ones. One is Sunni, and the other is Shia. And we're not going to into like the background of it, just basically who controlled Islam after Muhammad died is the big split. What we do want to know is the differences, and that is about 90% of the world's Muslims are actually Sunni. So if you were to meet one in the United States, somebody who practices Islam, they're probably Sunni Muslims. The authority in Sunni Islam comes from like the community and then the traditions of Muhammad as interpreted by the community or the follower. Compare it more towards like Protestant Christianity in that the follower actually does a more of the interpretation than somebody else. In Shia Islam, that represents about 10% of Muslims around the world, and the authority actually comes from imams, like usually clerics and that kind of thing, that actually say, no, this is what the interpretation of Islam is, and this is how you should run your life. Similar also to the Catholic faith in that aspect. Okay. Now, around the world, Islam is the largest growing religion, quickest growing religion, and unlike Christianity, which is spread all around the world, or Judaism, which is in a tiny little part of the world, Islam is very dominant in North Africa and the Middle East. As you can see here, that's the large part of the population. Indonesia, right here, has the largest population of Muslims on the planet in a single country. So, again, very devout faith going on in these parts of the world in terms of Islam. Sunni Islam is most of the rest of the world. Shia Islam is dominant in Iran in the Middle East. That's really the capital. When you talk about, okay, where is the majority of the Shia Muslim population? It's mainly in Iran. About 95% of its population are Shia Muslims, and almost the entire population are practicing Muslims overall as well. So, if we're talking about what country in the world is dominant Shia Muslim, Iran is the big one that we'll find. And of course, they often conflict with Saudi Arabia, who is dominant Sunni Muslim for control of this region. In the United States, you do have larger Muslim populations back east, places like Chicago, Illinois, New York City, and New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. You have significant East African populations have migrated to Michigan and Minnesota, which is why they are a little bit darker green. Okay. Prophets and stories. There's basically one story, and that is the life of Muhammad and the teachings of Muhammad. So everything around this religion, much like Christianity is around Jesus, in Islam it's around Muhammad. However, uh, the prophets exist within Islam, like Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, King David, Jesus. They're all considered prophets. Only Muhammad, though, is the final prophet. He is the direct messenger from God. So that's the big difference: is that there are other prophets, but the head cheese is Muhammad. Your faith is basically built on five pillars of Islam that we're going to go over one by one. And these five pillars are what every Muslim is supposed to do. So you can count these also as your rituals that need to be practiced. Number one, there is no God, there's no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Now understand that that God is the same Abrahamic God that we dealt with in Christianity and Judaism. The difference being is that Muhammad is the final messenger, the final prophet from God. And that this is the number one pillar of the Islamic faith. Number two, you pray 5 times a day towards Mecca. If you do not know where Mecca is, you usually point east. Now, does everybody do this that's Muslim? No, but if you're a good, devout, practicing Muslim, you do this 5 times a day. Sometimes, if you ever seen like a television show or a movie and you hear the Allah Akbar coming out of like a speaker and people stop what they're doing, that's the beginning of the call of prayer. Allah Akbar is just simply God is great. And that is the call to prayer. Uh, Giving to the poor is another pillar of the Islamic faith. oh, if you go to a Muslim society, they will have a lot of donation boxes for people to put in money. A lot of people volunteer to help out people that are less better off. So, giving to the poor, big part of the Islamic faith. Fasting during a holy month of Ramadan from sunup to sundown. After sundown, you may eat, but this is, yeah, and again, Ramadan falls on different parts of the Christian calendar year, so it can vary. But if you are with other Muslims, and you'll notice that they won't eat from sunup to sundown, they may be fasting during their holy month of Ramadan. And finally, the pilgrimage to Mecca, known as the Hajj, where they, like every Muslim goes, they don very similar clothing. They circle the Kaaba. They make their way and trek across the desert to the plains of Arafat, where they engage in prayer. They come back to the plain of Mina, where they throw stones at pillars that represent the devil. They circle the Kaaba again, the Kaaba being that cube right there in the middle, and then their Hajj is over. They should take that one time in their life. To be a good Muslim, you must submit to the will of Allah. Now, understand, your average Muslim is going, and I don't know if it's like be more devout, but they're going to make greater changes in their life than the average Jewish person or the average Christian. They're going to be more conservative, often in dress, in mannerisms, in um, in their obedience to food and drink that they consume. And this is part of what's known as halal, also, that we will talk about. The holy book is the Quran. It was written by Muhammad. It has parts about his life and his teachings, and how a Muslim needs to lead a good existence. We have our rituals, which is our 5 pillars of Islam that we have already talked about. That should be your focus in terms of, okay, what are the rituals? Well, declaration, prayer, giving, fasting during Ramadan, pilgrimage to Mecca one time in your life. Okay. The Sabbath is a day of rest. There is no Sabbath in Islam. There is no day of rest. There is more devout Muslims will engage in Friday evening prayers, where they will go like like Christians would go on a Sunday to a church. You would get Friday evening prayers where you'd be giving spiritual guidance, maybe some kind of something similar to a sermon that we'll talk about, what the role of religion is in a person's life, and how to be a good Muslim and submit to the will of Allah. Halal was referenced before. Halal is simply religious laws having to do with food. Things that are halal are things that are acceptable. They Once it's halal, it means it's good. It's like kosher, just different rules. Anything not halal is considered haram. This would include meat that comes from pigs and elephants and bears and birds of prey, that kind of thing. Most people know that most Muslims don't eat pork. Domesticated animals, animals that live underground, insects, any sea creature except for fish. Any animals must be treated with extreme respect and then slaughtered painlessly. This is a big part of halal. And then no blood can be in your meat, so it has to be cooked thoroughly through. And then no alcohol. And you'll see a lot of Muslims not drink alcohol, to be, very strong to make sure that their diet is halal. Your place of worship is a mosque. Mosques can be small. Most mosques will contain a minaret. Mosques can also be extremely grand and magnificent and have multiple minarets, but minarets are actually something architecturally you'll see in a lot of mosques. A religious specialist is going to be an imam. Imam will lead the services that usually occur at the mosque and provide religious guidance. Sometimes you will hear about this, and this is an ayatollah. An ayatollah is Shia Islam only. They're usually grand clerics that interpret things like the Quran and often give guidance about how laws should be interpreted based on the Quran. The symbol of the Islamic faith is the crescent, and you will often see this design, like the red crescent is equal to the red cross, only it is in Muslim countries. Some historical contributions. Algebra. If you like advanced math, congratulations, you have Islam to thank for that. The idea of a pharmacy, using medicine in a more almost commercialized way to stay healthy, that has to do with Islam. Religious toleration. As an overall faith, The first faith to really be accepting of like Jews first was Islam. They say you can live here as long as you never go against Islam or talk bad about it. You can be here in our empire. Architecture and art, because you don't can't have pictures uh, of Muhammad at all. It's blasphemous. They have some fantastic architecture, ceramic work, tile work. It's all fabulous. A lot of it's extremely beautiful. And then optics. If you are using glasses, the idea that light comes into your eye and is refracted in certain ways, that comes from the Muslim empires. Problems within Islam, number one is the Shia Sunni split. It's gone back a long ways, but it's really political. Iran is more Shia, Saudi Arabia, a lot of these countries out here are more Sunni, and they kind of want to battle it out for dominance, like who should influence this area more. So the split between Sunni and Shia Islam. Sharia law is extreme fundamental law, and it's the idea that if you're living Sharia law, you're living a divine life from Allah. But the punishments are often extremely harsh in this. Big time stick. If you're like whippings, beatings, canings, executions, if you're in an extreme fundamentalist sense, that is not uncommon at all. And part of that is women in terms of faith, that women are often seen as second class citizens, not because of Islam. Islam is very specific that women and men are equal, but the interpretations are done by men. And so men will do things like require certain dress coverings, the hijab, which is a headscarf, the chador, which covers almost everything except for the face, the niqab, which just covers everything but the eyes, and then the burqa, which covers the entire body essentially. These are examples of kind of suppressing the dress of women, not allowing women to go to school if you get more extreme Islamic countries. Malala Yousafzai, who is a ambassador of education for women around the world, she was shot in the head as a teenager when she tried to go to school in Pakistan and survived, and then advocates for women's education. And you're starting to see pushback in Islamic countries like Iran, where women have started to trash their hijabs and are now walking around blatantly in public, and where a hijab is actually part of the legal code. You are required to wear one in public. And there are so many women that are doing it that Iran's kind of like, I don't know, what do we do? Do we just round up everybody and beat them down, or what is happening? And so there's some very strong changes going on in Iran. Finally, you have Islamic fundamentalism, and we're talking about strong Islamic fundamentalism here. We're talking about groups like ISIS, the Islamic State, or Al Qaeda or Boko Haram in northeastern Nigeria, or Al Shabaab in Ethiopia and Somalia. These are groups that um, think that their interpretation of the Quran, which is super, 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 super hardcore, is the only way to go about it. And they often engage in terrorism, kidnapping. Obviously, with Al Qaeda, it resulted in 9/11. It is not any kind of legitimate representation of the Islamic faith. And in fact, when these things happen, the people that often, most often, actually suffer are other Muslims. Um, so, when you hear about Islamic fundamentalism, when you hear about that kind of terror and violence, understand that the people that are usually um, the greatest victims of fundamentalist groups, people that insist that their faith, the way they view the faith, is the only way to do it. The people that are actually the biggest victims are other Muslims. Okay, so that is our last monotheistic Abrahamic faith. That is Islam.